Every night, my husband checked the door before we went to bed. Every night, the deadbolt clicked, the chain slid into place, and his hand lingered on the knob like he was listening for something on the other side. One night, he forgot. I noticed because the house felt wrong. Not loud. Not broken. Just exposed. Like a breath held too long and then released all at once. I was 29 years old, standing barefoot in our hallway at almost midnight, staring at a front door that was unlocked. And for the first time since I'd known him, my husband was already asleep. I didn't wake him right away. That's the part people always judge later. They ask why I didn't shake him, why I didn't call his name, why I didn't laugh it off and lock it myself. The truth is, my body reacted before my mind did. My chest tightened. My skin prickled. Something old and quiet inside me said, "Pay attention." The door wasn't just unlocked. It was unlatched. Not wide open, just resting against the frame, as if someone had closed it gently from the outside. I remember thinking how strange it was that I could hear the refrigerator hum from the kitchen, the soft ticking of the clock above the stove, the faint rush of cars on the highway 3 miles away. All the normal sounds were there. And yet I felt like I was standing in the wrong version of my own life. My husband, Daniel, had always been careful. Not cautious. Careful. There's a difference. He didn't flinch at shadows or double-check windows in a panic. He moved through the world like a man who believed in preparation, not fear. That was one of the things I loved about him. The way he took responsibility for small things without making a show of it. The way safety, to him, was an act of love. So when I saw that door, my first thought wasn't danger. It was confusion. I locked it. Slowly. Quietly. The deadbolt slid home with a soft, final click. The chain followed. My hands were steady, but my heart was not. I stood there for a long moment afterward, palm flat against the wood, waiting for something. A sound. A knock. The feeling to pass. Nothing happened. Back in the bedroom, Daniel slept on his side, facing away from me. His breathing was even. Peaceful. The same man who, just hours earlier, had kissed my forehead and asked if I'd set the alarm. The same man who never forgot the door. I lay down without touching him. I stared at the ceiling and tried to tell myself a reasonable story. Everyone forgets things. Routines slip. Habits break. This meant nothing. Except it didn't feel like nothing. At some point, I drifted into a shallow, restless sleep. The kind where your mind keeps circling the same thought, never landing, never letting go. When morning came, it came too fast. Daniel was already awake, dressed for work, moving around the kitchen with his coffee mug in hand. He leaned down to kiss me like always. That's when I asked, "Did you check the door last night?" It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even loaded. It was just a question, tossed lightly into the space between us. I expected him to smile, maybe tease himself for forgetting. Instead, he froze. Not startled. Not confused. Frozen. Like my words had hit something brittle inside him and cracked it clean through. His face drained of color. His eyes flicked, not to me, but toward the hallway. Toward the front door. Toward the place where his routine had failed. And then he looked back at me. Terrified. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything I thought I understood about my marriage began to unravel. Because the fear on his face wasn't about an unlocked door. It was about the fact that I had noticed. And standing there in my kitchen, watching the man I trusted most struggle to breathe around a secret he could no longer hide, one question settled into my bones and refused to leave. What kind of truth requires that much protection, and what happens when it slips through anyway? Before that night, my life fit together in a way that felt earned. Not flashy. Not perfect. Just solid. Daniel and I had been married for 4 years, together for 7. We met in our mid-20s, when everything still felt flexible, careers half-formed, personalities still sanding down their sharper edges. He worked in logistics for a regional distribution company. I was a project coordinator for a healthcare nonprofit. We weren't chasing status. We were building something quieter. Our house sat at the edge of a newer subdivision, where the trees were still thin and the sidewalks still smelled faintly like poured concrete on hot days. 2 bedrooms, beige siding, a tiny porch Daniel kept meaning to repaint. It wasn't a dream home, but it was ours. We filled it slowly, intentionally. A couch we saved for. A dining table from my aunt. Framed photos that marked time instead of milestones. Our evenings were predictable in the best way. Dinner around 7. A show we half-watched while scrolling on our phones. Daniel always washed the pans while I wiped the counters. Then the door. Every night. Same sequence. Same motions. A ritual so ingrained I could hear it from the bedroom and know exactly where he was in the process without looking. At the time, I thought it was just one of his quirks. Daniel didn't talk much about his past. Not because he was secretive, at least that's what I told myself, but because he didn't dwell. His childhood stories were sparse but neutral. No drama. No trauma. Just a general sense that he'd learned early how to take care of himself. I admired that. I came from a family that talked everything to death. His silence felt like strength. And our marriage, God, I really believed in it. Not in a naive way. I knew marriages were work. I knew love wasn't a constant state. But I believed we were honest with each other. That if something mattered, we'd say it. That if something was wrong, we'd face it together. Looking back, that belief rested on something fragile, the assumption that routine equals truth. The morning after the unlocked door, Daniel tried to recover quickly. Too quickly. He laughed it off, said he must have been distracted, blamed a late email from work. He kissed my cheek, grabbed his bag, and left 10 minutes earlier than usual. I told myself to accept it. But the fear I'd seen didn't match the explanation. It lingered in the air like a smell you can't place but can't ignore either. Over the next few days, I watched him more closely. Not in a suspicious way, not yet. Just, attentive. I noticed things I'd never catalogued before. The way he checked his phone the second he woke up. The way he locked his car with a double click and waited for the confirmation beep. The way he flinched, not dramatically, just subtly, when someone knocked unexpectedly. None of it was new. That was the unsettling part. These behaviors had always been there. I just hadn't been looking at them as pieces of a pattern. At night, he was back to checking the door. Extra careful now. Too careful. Testing the knob twice. Pulling on it like he didn't trust the lock to do its job without his supervision. Once, I joked gently, "It's not going anywhere." He didn't smile. Instead, he said, "You never know." There are moments in a relationship where something small tilts, and you feel the shift before you understand it. Not a crack. Not a break. Just a change in pressure. That's where I was living now. I didn't confront him. I didn't snoop. I didn't spiral. I went to work. I made dinner. I folded laundry and listened to podcasts and told myself this was what long-term relationships looked like, periods of quiet distance that resolved on their own. But at night, when the house settled and Daniel's breathing slowed beside me, I found myself listening too. Not for intruders. For movement. For absence. For the sense that something was being held just out of reach. Maybe you know this feeling, the one where nothing is wrong, exactly, but nothing is fully right either. Where love still exists, but certainty has thinned. Where you start realizing that trust isn't something you lose all at once. Sometimes, it erodes in silence. And somewhere in that silence, without meaning to, I began preparing myself. Not for a specific truth. Just for the possibility that the life I believed in had been built on something incomplete. I didn't know yet how deep that incompleteness went. I only knew the door would never sound the same again. The first real crack didn't come from the door. It came from a Tuesday afternoon I almost skipped. I'd left work early with a headache, the kind that settles behind your eyes and makes every email feel louder than it should. I texted Daniel to let him know I'd be home. He didn't respond, which wasn't unusual. His job kept him in and out of warehouses where service dropped without warning. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet for 4 in the afternoon, but again, nothing alarming. I kicked off my shoes, set my bag on the counter, and went straight to the bedroom to lie down. That's when I heard it. A soft metallic click. Not from the front door. From the hallway. I froze, heart thudding once, hard. Then logic rushed in. The HVAC turning on. Pipes. The house settling. I stood there, listening, counting seconds. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No voices. Just the low hum of the air conditioning. I told myself I was jumpy. That once you start noticing things, you notice everything. Still, I walked the house. Room by room. Closet doors open. Bathroom empty. Front door locked. Chain in place. Daniel's office door was closed. That was new. He almost never closed it. He liked the light from the window spilling into the hallway, said it made the house feel open. I stood there for a moment, my hand hovering inches from the knob, feeling ridiculous for hesitating in my own home. I knocked. Lightly. Daniel. No answer. I opened the door. The room was empty. His desk was tidy, too tidy. Laptop gone. Papers stacked with an order I didn't recognize. The window was cracked open, even though the AC was running. And on the floor, near the baseboard, was something I had never seen before. A second lock. Not installed. Not loose. Just there. Heavy. Industrial. The kind you'd see on a storage unit or a commercial gate. Cold steel, thick shackle. Out of place in a room that smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. Solid. Real. I stood there holding it, my mind reaching for explanations the way it always had. Work equipment. A favor for a friend. Something temporary. But explanations require context. And there was none. When Daniel came home that evening, I didn't mention it right away. We ate dinner. We talked about our days. I waited for him to bring up the office. He didn't. Finally, while he was rinsing plates at the sink, I said, "I went into your office today." His shoulders stiffened. Just slightly. Enough. Okay, he said. There was a lock on the floor. Silence. Water running. The clink of ceramic. He turned the faucet off slowly. Too slowly. "It's nothing," he said. "Just something from work." I watched his face as he spoke. Not looking for guilt, looking for alignment. For his words and his body to tell the same story. They didn't. I nodded. Let it drop. That was my pattern then. Gather. Wait. I told myself I was being patient, not afraid. That night, after he fell asleep, I got up quietly and went back to the office. The lock was gone. So was a box I didn't remember seeing before. The space where it had been was clean, like it had never existed at all. I stood there in the dark, the weight of that absence pressing down on me harder than the object itself ever had. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't coincidence. This was correction. He was adjusting the story. I went back to bed and lay awake until dawn, my thoughts circling the same uncomfortable realization. Whatever Daniel was hiding, it wasn't passive. It required maintenance. Awareness. Control. And control only matters when there's something at risk. I didn't confront him the next day. Or the next. Instead, I started paying attention in a new way, not emotionally, but strategically. Times. Patterns. What he carried in and out of the house. Which questions made him tense. Which silences felt deliberate. There's a strange calm that settles in when suspicion replaces confusion. When you stop asking why and start asking how. I remember thinking, very clearly, if I'm going to learn the truth, it won't be because he tells me. It will be because he slips again. And deep down, I sensed he would. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It crept in, piece by piece, like water seeping through a wall you didn't know was cracked. I wish I could say there was a single, undeniable moment, something cinematic, something clean. But betrayal rarely announces itself that way. It reveals itself through accumulation. Through the quiet stacking of things you can no longer explain away. I started with what was easiest to justify, observation. Daniel's schedule shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough to matter. Later nights. Earlier mornings. Meetings that ran long but never produced stories worth telling. He stopped complaining about work altogether, which was unusual for someone who used to process his day out loud while brushing his teeth. Then there were the calls. He didn't hide them. That's what made it worse. He answered his phone openly, spoke in normal tones, never left the room. But the conversations were short. Controlled. And afterward, he always seemed braced. Like someone waiting for the echo of a sound only he could hear. One night, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in his jeans pocket. A storage facility on the other side of town. Paid in cash. Monthly. I stared at that thin strip of paper for a long time. Storage units are easy to rationalize. People use them for everything. Furniture. Old files. Hobbies they don't have room for. Secrets that aren't dangerous, just inconvenient. But Daniel wasn't a cluttered person. He hated excess. He purged aggressively. We'd donated half our garage the year before because he couldn't stand owning things we didn't actively choose. So what was this? I didn't confront him. Not yet. I drove to the facility the next afternoon instead. It was anonymous in the way all storage places are. Long rows of metal doors. Gravel crunching under tires. A front office that smelled like dust and air freshener. I told myself I was just looking. Just confirming something harmless so I could put my mind at ease. The unit was registered under his name. No hesitation from the clerk. No drama. I stood in front of the door for a full minute before unlocking it. Inside, the space was small. Neat. Too neat. A single shelf along the back wall. A folding chair. A locked metal cabinet bolted to the floor. And next to it, coiled carefully like a sleeping animal, was a length of heavy chain. My mouth went dry. This wasn't storage. This was preparation. I didn't open the cabinet. I didn't touch anything. I locked the unit exactly as I'd found it and sat in my car afterward, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to keep my breathing even. That was the moment the lowest truth settled in. Whatever Daniel was doing, it wasn't new. It wasn't impulsive. It had been planned, maintained, protected. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I checked our bank account. Nothing unusual. No missing money. No erratic charges. Which meant he'd been careful. Or practiced. The final confirmation came 2 days later. I was home early again, this time on purpose, and I heard voices. Muted. Controlled. Coming from Daniel's office. I stood at the end of the hallway, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. I didn't recognize the voice he was speaking to. Male. Calm. Familiar to him. I told you, Daniel said quietly, it stays where it is. No exceptions. A pause. No. She doesn't know. That word, she, hit me harder than any confession could have. I stepped back before they could hear me. I went into the bathroom and locked the door, lowering myself onto the edge of the tub like my legs had forgotten how to hold me. There it was. Not a suspicion. Not a pattern. A line he was actively drawing between me and something else. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the house to go quiet again. Long enough for the version of my life I believed in to finally collapse under the weight of proof. When I emerged, the office was empty. The window open again. The air disturbed. I walked through the house like a guest. Like someone seeing it all for the first time. Every familiar object felt slightly misaligned, like it belonged to a different story than the one I'd been telling myself. I didn't cry then. That came later. What I felt in that moment was something colder and more clarifying, resolve. There's a particular kind of pain that doesn't scream. It steadies you. It strips away illusion and leaves you with one unshakable understanding. You are not safe in ignorance anymore. And if you've ever stood at that edge, where love and fear occupy the same space, you know how lonely it is. How heavy it feels to realize you're grieving something that technically still exists. That night, lying next to Daniel, listening to his breathing, I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg for the truth. I was going to take it back. I didn't confront Daniel because confrontation still gave him power. As long as he believed I was in the dark, he moved freely. He made mistakes. He relaxed in small, dangerous ways. And I needed that more than I needed answers delivered on his terms. So I planned. Not obsessively. Not dramatically. Quietly. The way you plan when you already know something is ending and you just need to decide how much damage you're willing to take with you. First, I protected myself. I copied documents, tax returns, insurance policies, account statements, and stored them digitally under a name that meant nothing. I changed passwords he didn't know existed. I moved my personal savings to an account he'd never touched. None of it felt like betrayal. It felt like adulthood arriving all at once, heavy and unavoidable. Then I watched. I tracked his routines the way he'd tracked the door. Which days he went to the storage unit. Which nights he stayed late. Which excuses came preloaded and which he had to reach for. I learned the rhythm of his secrecy, and once I understood it, it stopped feeling omnipotent. It felt human. Fallible. Emotionally, I oscillated between numbness and something dangerously close to grief. Not for him, at least not yet, but for myself. For the woman who had believed that love and honesty were synonymous. For the years I'd spent interpreting his caution as care. There were moments I almost stopped. Moments where I looked at him across the dinner table, his face relaxed, familiar, and thought, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've misunderstood something harmless and I'm about to destroy us both. But then I remembered the cabinet. The chain. The word she'd spoken like a boundary. And I kept going. I hired a private investigator using a personal recommendation from a colleague who never asked questions. I told her I needed confirmation, not interpretation. Facts only. She delivered. Daniel wasn't cheating. Not in the way people expect. There were no hotel rooms. No dating profiles. No secret second life built on romance. Instead, there was a name. An address. A man he met twice a month, always during daylight, always briefly. A man with a criminal record tied to violent extortion. A man Daniel had known long before he knew me. The story that emerged wasn't simple, but it was clear. Daniel had been involved in something illegal years ago. Something he claimed he'd left behind. Something that hadn't let go. The locks. The door. The storage unit. Not paranoia. Containment. I sat with that information for a long time. Long enough to feel the anger rise and then settle into something heavier. Because here was the moral line I hadn't expected to face. Daniel hadn't just endangered himself. He'd endangered me. Without my consent. Without my knowledge. While building a life that depended on my trust. I don't know what you believe about loyalty. I don't know where you draw the line between protecting your partner and protecting yourself. But I can tell you this. There is a difference between carrying a burden together and forcing someone to live under its shadow without telling them why. That distinction mattered to me. So I made my choice. I wasn't going to expose him publicly. I wasn't going to play detective any longer. And I wasn't going to stay. But I was going to confront him in a way that left no room for manipulation. I prepared what I needed. Copies of the investigator's report. Photos. Dates. Timelines. I packed a bag and left it in my car. I told my sister to expect a call and to come if I asked. No questions. The night I chose was deliberate. A quiet Thursday. No stress. No alcohol. No distractions. When Daniel came home, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I sat at the table and waited for him to notice that something had shifted. He did. "What's wrong?" he asked. I slid the folder across the table. And for the first time since I'd known him, Daniel didn't try to control the door. He just stared at what I'd placed between us, and understood that whatever he'd been locking out had finally come inside. Daniel didn't open the folder right away. He stared at it like it might bite him. Like paper alone could do damage he'd spent years preventing. I watched his hands. That was where the truth always leaked out. They trembled once, barely. Then stilled. He took a breath, slow and measured, the way he always did before checking the door. "I can explain," he said. I shook my head. Not sharply. Just enough. "No," I said. "You can confirm." That stopped him. He opened the folder. I didn't speak while he read. I didn't fill the air. I let the weight of facts do what emotion never could. Dates. Photos. The storage unit. The man's name circled in red. The criminal record printed clean and undeniable. Each page stripped something from him. Confidence. Deflection. Time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were glassy, not with tears, but with the realization that the story he'd been managing had reached its last page. "I was trying to protect you," he said. That sentence landed exactly where I expected it to. "From what?" I asked. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He swallowed. "From my past." "No," I said. "From your present." Silence snapped between us. He started talking then. Fast. Not frantic, but urgent. He told me about a mistake in his early 20s. About money he'd moved where it shouldn't have gone. About a man who'd helped him, and then never stopped reminding him of the debt. About threats that never materialized but never fully disappeared either. "I handled it," he said. "I kept it contained." I nodded slowly. You locked it up? Yes. And brought me inside it, I said. Without telling me. That was the moment his control broke. He stood up, ran a hand through his hair, paced once, then stopped like he remembered who I was and what I knew now. I was going to tell you, he said. I just needed it to be over. I let the words hang there. Because here was the truth he didn't want to face. Over was a moving target. And I had been living in the blast radius of something I never agreed to survive. I heard you, I said quietly. He frowned. Heard me? In the office, I said. When you said she doesn't know. That did it. His face collapsed, not dramatically, not theatrically. Just a clean surrender. Like a man finally putting down something too heavy to carry any longer. I never meant to trap you, he said. But you did, I replied. And you don't get to decide. Intent matters more than outcome. There was nothing left to uncover. No twist. No hidden villain stepping out of the shadows. Just two people sitting at a table where the truth had finally caught up. I stood. He didn't reach for me. That, more than anything, told me he understood. I'm leaving tonight, I said. I've already arranged it. Emily. I'm not calling the police, I continued. I'm not exposing you. That's not who I want to be. Hope flickered in his eyes. But I am done, I finished. Because love doesn't survive secrecy that big. And safety doesn't survive lies that practiced. I picked up my bag from the corner of the room. As I walked toward the door, I felt it, that old instinct. The one he trained into both of us. The pause. The check. Behind me, he said my name once. Soft. Almost reverent. I turned back just enough to say, you should stop locking doors against the truth. It always finds another way in. Then I opened the front door. Unlocked. And walked out. If you felt a jolt in that moment, relief tangled with grief, you're not alone. Some endings don't explode. They click open, quietly, and change everything by letting you leave. The first night away from Daniel, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because my body didn't know what to do without vigilance anymore. I lay on my sister's guest bed, staring at a ceiling fan that clicked softly with each rotation, and waited for the familiar tension that had lived in my chest for years to tell me what came next. It didn't. Instead, there was space. Uncomfortable, unstructured space. The kind you don't notice until it's finally empty. The days that followed were oddly quiet. No dramatic fallout. No late-night calls. No apologies delivered in paragraphs. Daniel respected the boundary I'd drawn, which almost hurt more than if he'd tried to cross it. We spoke once. Logistics only. He agreed to the separation without resistance. I think part of him knew that once the truth was out, there was no version of our marriage that could survive intact. I moved into a small apartment across town. 1 bedroom. White walls. Nothing familiar. I bought a mattress first, then a lamp, then a cheap kitchen table that wobbled if you leaned on it too hard. Each purchase felt like a declaration. I exist independently now. Emotion came in waves. Not floods. Grief showed up unexpectedly, standing in line at the grocery store, folding a towel, hearing a song Daniel used to hum while cooking. But it wasn't the kind of grief that begs you to go back. It was cleaner than that. Sadness without confusion. Loss without doubt. What surprised me most was how safe I felt. Not euphoric. Not triumphant. Just safe. Like my nervous system had finally been told it could stand down. I realized how long I'd been living in a low-grade state of alert. How my body had learned Daniel's rituals not as comfort, but as cues. Door locked meant peace. Silence meant danger. Routine meant survival. Without those signals, I had to relearn my own. Therapy helped. Slowly. Honestly. Not to villainize Daniel, but to understand why I'd mistaken control for care. Why I'd accepted partial truth as intimacy. Why I hadn't asked harder questions sooner. And here's the part that's hardest to admit. I don't hate him. I hate the choices he made. I hate that he removed my agency. I hate that he let love coexist with deception and convinced himself that was protection. But I don't hate him. If that makes you uncomfortable, you're not wrong. It made me uncomfortable too. We're taught that clarity should come with clean emotional lines. Good people here. Bad people there. Real life doesn't work like that. Some people hurt you deeply while genuinely believing they're doing the right thing. And sometimes, loving yourself means walking away from someone you still care about, not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally started loving yourself more. The divorce was finalized quietly. No courtroom drama. Just signatures and paperwork and the strange finality of watching a shared name become singular again. Emily Parker. Just me. One night, months later, I stood in my new apartment and realized something that made me laugh out loud. The door was unlocked. I'd forgotten to check it. Not because I was careless. Because I wasn't afraid. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a question, a recognition you didn't expect, you're welcome to sit with it. You don't have to label it or solve it right now. Sometimes awareness is the first kind of healing. I didn't rebuild my life overnight. I didn't emerge wiser in a way that felt poetic or Instagram ready. But I emerged honest. And that turned out to be enough. There's a version of this story I used to imagine telling where everything made sense in hindsight. Where the clues lined up neatly. Where I could say, I should have known, and feel smarter for surviving it. But that's not the truth. The truth is, I didn't miss the signs because I was weak or naive. I missed them because I trusted the person standing closest to me. Because I believed love meant shared reality. Because I thought if something were truly dangerous, I would feel it clearly and all at once. That's not how it works. Real danger often arrives disguised as normalcy. As routine. As someone else's calm competence. It hides in habits that look like care and in silence that feels respectful. And by the time it asks something of you, you're already inside it. For a long time after I left, I replayed the night of the unlocked door. I wondered what would have happened if I'd ignored it. If I'd locked it quietly and never asked the question. If Daniel would still be checking it every night, and I'd still be sleeping beside him, believing the sound of that lock meant I was safe. Maybe we would have lasted longer. But longevity isn't the same as integrity. What I've learned, slowly, imperfectly, is that trust isn't about how much someone does for you. It's about how much they allow you to see. Especially when what there is to see might change how you feel about them. Love that requires blindness is not love that endures. It's love that delays. I don't tell this story to paint myself as brave or decisive. I wasn't. I was scared. I hesitated. I doubted myself more times than I can count. The strength came later, after the facts, after the clarity, after the quiet moment where I realized staying would cost me something I couldn't replace. My sense of reality. And here's the quiet truth I wish someone had said to me sooner. You are allowed to leave situations that haven't exploded yet. You are allowed to walk away from relationships that look fine on the outside but feel wrong in your body. You are allowed to prioritize safety even when no one else thinks you're in danger. Sometimes the bravest thing you do is believe yourself before the proof becomes catastrophic. I still live alone. I still forget to lock the door sometimes. Not because I'm careless, but because fear no longer runs my evenings. I lock it when I remember. I unlock it when I want to let someone in. And every time, it's my choice. So I'll leave you with this, not as a challenge, not as advice, just as something to sit with the next time your intuition whispers instead of shouts. When was the last time you noticed something small that didn't make sense, and decided not to look away? So that's my story. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far my voice travels. Truth doesn't always arrive loudly, but listening to it early can save you from losing yourself later.